Hey, Sens fans. Thanks for joining us for Season 3, Episode 26 of the Sens Centennial Podcast. This week, we're going to announce the winners of our card giveaway on Twitter, get the insider scoop on Bennett's recent interaction with Sens GM Pierre Dorion. Then we'll discuss Peter McTavish leaving the organization, and we'll also make the cases for and against Daniel Alfredsson making the Hockey Hall of Fame. Plus, we're going to discuss Connor Brown's possible interest in testing free agency next summer, who our preferred top six forward additions are, if we could have a preferred one, and the origins and legend of Gulk. So we'll kick it off in fourth place. I drew them just before the episode. We have Troy at $2 Kachuk. So congratulations. Love the name. You have won, I believe it was the Tim Stützle debut dates base card. In third place, we have Robert Vitalone at Vitalone_Robert. You have got in the Tim Stützle Upper Deck canvas card. Second place, we have KW3 season at 12th Man North. Love the Seahawks, by the way. Good job. But you've won the Tim Stützle debut dates jersey card. And in first place, we have Zimmer at Zimmer. And you have won the Josh Norris card that we added late to the giveaway. So congratulations, you guys. Everyone else who didn't win, thank you for participating. We're going to do more giveaways in the future, so look out for them. Hopefully, I think I'm going to plan something for the draft, so keep your eyes peeled for that. All right. Woo. Bennett, you have the insider boots on the ground knowledge. You ran into Pierre Dorion today, so I need you to break it down for us. What went down?
I did. I completely unexpectedly ran into Pierre Dorion. And let me preface this by saying, I'm going to name the place at which I ran into him. And please don't go to this place looking to run into Pierre Dorion. Don't make it don't make it weird. Don't start stalking the guy. But I just want to name the place because they're great and they deserve a shout out.
They're really awesome.
Yeah, so it's Pesto's Deli. They're on Hazeltine Drive. They make really good Italian sandwiches. They also have some traditional Nicastro sort of Italian grocery bits and bobs. It's great. So, and I guess Pierre is kind of a regular there because when I went to get my sandwich today, he was joking around with the owner. They knew each other's names and everything. So it's crazy. I mean, he came in and I just immediately, my eyes went big and I was like, okay, be cool. And I was as soon as he came in, I was like, I'm going to talk to him. I have to say something. There's no way I'm going to let this guy walk out here without me bothering him. And so after he ordered and after he paid and everything, I was like, hey, excuse me, question for you. Do you think we're going to hang on to the 7th overall pick? And to his credit, he laughed and I laughed. He said, "Oh, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I don't know if he was just, giving me the brush off or if they actually haven't decided yet. I think either could be true. But he was really nice about it. And, I thanked him for everything he does for the team and everything. I acknowledge that I am often extremely harsh on him on this podcast. So I deigned not to invite him on or to encourage him to listen to our content because I feel like that would just be uncool given how nice he was. But just wanted to give a little shout out to Pierre, who seemed very nice and affable and was it was just cool to see him in the flesh and chat with him briefly.
For what it's worth, I went to Pesto's. I am also a regular there. And I ran into Drake Batherson and Colin White and a couple other guys. The Sens love that place.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's a Sens player haunt.
Cool.
So Batherson coming soon to the Centennial podcast.
That's right.
If I get the works on my Italiano sandwich, then maybe, who knows? We'll see.
Well, keeping in line with the front office conversation, the assistant general manager for the Sens, Peter McTavish, actually recently left the org. And I think it was a bit of a surprise because it was kind of rumored and not even really rumored, actually. It was just straight out reported that the Sens were looking to add to their front office. And then about a week later, Peter McTavish actually leaves the front office. So that was really interesting. Now, Peter McTavish, he joined Cortex Hockey, which, as far as I can gather, it looks like it's an agency that helps players with managing their career, both in amateur and pro, and then following their playing career. So good for him. And he left to go to an opportunity that I'm sure he'll do well in. But it's very interesting from a Sens perspective that they're looking to add to their front office and they let him go. So I wanted either of you guys, and we'll kick it off maybe with Matt, to weigh in and kind of what's your opinion on that?
First of all, just let me briefly interrupt you to say that as soon as you did that transition, I realized I totally missed my opportunity to just shoot my shot with Pierre and be like, hey, I know you need a new assistant general manager. I'm your guy. That if you believe like your dads when they talk about how you're supposed to actually get jobs and everything, that was my golden opportunity, and I let it.
Yeah, slip. It really was.
We'll forward this to their social media department.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the whole Peter McTavish leaving thing is an interesting situation because he was not really in the limelight when it came to Sens land. I know he did a lot of the Belleville Senator stuff and from what I understood before that though, like he didn't have much of a hockey background. It was more business development and so on. And it never felt like he was sort of supposed to be the heir apparent. Like he was next in line. It was always, he's just the assistant general manager. And maybe that was one of the reasons he left. He wanted to go somewhere that there was a little more movement upwards or, the obvious position being general manager. But it'd be hard for someone to promote a assistant general manager, but not do the general manager. I recently learned from Zub's agent that he was apparently a very big part of getting Zub to join the team. And that just gives you a bit of a glimpse into into behind the curtain when it comes to hockey operations decisions and stuff like that. The timing is definitely weird, though. I can't say that it doesn't, set off some warning bells that they'd say we're looking for front office people, and then our assistant GM leaves. He seems like a really cool guy, from what I understand. And good luck in his next role, but we are losing more people than we're gaining, and that is still an issue, past the Eugene Melnyk era.
Yeah, I would only add to that I agree the timing seems a little odd. I would just say that, I'm curious to see what direction the Sens go with this. It would be great if they could use this appointment to close some of the gaps that are apparent within the organization, particularly when it comes to stuff like pro scouting. I know that we were just saying that bringing in Zub may have been a McTavish brainchild. If so, it's a huge credit to him because that was an excellent find. But I mean, like one successful pro player acquisition does not like a competent program make. And I feel that, we still whiff far more than we hit when it comes to bringing in pro talent. And that's something that I would want a new assistant GM to really be able to help the team with.
I'm more curious to see who they find to fill in some of these voids that are in the organization. Because when you look out there, there's not a lot of that I can think of, I guess I don't want to call them old timers or people with a lot of experience in the industry, but usually guys who you want to pick up in your organization have been elsewhere, have helped out. Like, for example, Rutherford, who ended up going to the Vancouver Canucks. He's a guy who was sitting on the sidelines for, I believe, about a season or half a season, something like that, before he got picked up by Vancouver. And the Sens had been looking for somebody for quite some time. So it's like, who do they pick up now? Do they go for someone local? And I know this isn't saying that I think this person is necessarily right for the job, but I know local people like Sean Simpson have applied in the past to work in the front office for the Sens when they were doing their last, public call that they were going to hire someone into their hockey ops. Cheryl Pounder's name has been floated out there, and I think that she's quite bright when it comes to talking about hockey and her analysis. She could be someone of interest. It's just, I think that if they're going to bring someone in their front office, it's going to have to be someone that's like fresh blood, so to speak, in the front office and hockey management world, because the veteran people or the senior people in the hockey world don't seem to be attracted to the Sens or are already setting themselves up for positions elsewhere. So that's kind of the interesting thing to me is where do the Sens go from here, and who do they bring into the front office to kind of fill that void that's now really noticeable?
I think Cheryl Pounder would be such an interesting get. Like you said, I've heard that name tossed around before. I think it's like the perfect mix of like somebody who like might not necessarily have the pedigree yet to be able to like command like positions at like the top teams in the league, but who has enough like knowledge and know-how and like respect within the sport to be able to succeed in the role. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think seeing more diversity in hockey is always a good thing too. But I mean, her reputation and her knowledge speaks for itself. And, she's got a great gig on TSN, but if she's ever looking to expand that into a hockey operations role, I think it would be a really good get for the Sens. But new blood in general is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, speaking about healthy reputation, Daniel Alfredsson, it seems like the Sens are finally acknowledging the need to put him or make a case for him to be put in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So we're going to discuss whether Alfie deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And we'll kick it off with Bennett, who has a bit of a contrarian point of view on this one.
Yeah, and let me start by saying that I think it's so good to see the Sens pulling for him now. It feels like all the media, all the former players and everyone in the city is kind of rallying around him this time, whereas it's sort of been fits and starts of kind of pushing of like the beginnings of a campaign to put Alfredsson in the Hall of Fame in previous seasons, but this feels like the first time there's been a real concerted effort that everybody's on board with. I think it's great. I think it shows his value to this team in this city. And, he's always going to be a Sens legend, and that's great. I think the question of whether Alfredsson deserves to be in the Hall of Fame is like a different one of whether we should be campaigning for him to be in the Hall of Fame, if that makes sense. I mean, like we should be doing so, but whether his addition to the Hall of Fame would be a benefit to the Hall is sort of a different question. I think first off, for me, you have to make a distinction between what the Hockey Hall of Fame is and what it ought to be. And I don't think you can make compelling arguments based on, the reality. It's like, oh, well, like he has more points than so-and-so who's in the Hall of Fame, ergo he should also be in the Hall of Fame. It's like, well, I don't think that the other person should be either. So that's not a very compelling argument to me. You don't make the Hall of Fame a better institution by just putting in more players who are of like dubious like deservedness to be there. And, I think equally, just like things like point totals and over years or decades or whatever are not a very compelling argument to me, because if I wanted to know who the top scorers of all time were, I would just open up NHL.com. That's not what the Hockey Hall of Fame is for. Which I guess takes you to the next question of like, what is the Hockey Hall of Fame for? And for me, it is a showcase of the players who defined the sport and who dominated their era. And what I mean by that is you need to be a truly dominant player, you need to be the first or the second or the third guy that you think of when you think about a decade or an era, the way that like, you might split up NHL history into certain eras, like the original six or, the Dead Puck or the Wild West of the 80s or whatever it is. And to me, dominance looks at three things. It's, do you compete for and win major individual awards like the Hart, the Art Ross, the Rocket Richard, the Selke, or the Norris? Did you score points at an elite level, both in terms of consistency and individual season volume? So, whether you were a 70-point player for 10 seasons or a 100-point player for 3 seasons, I would say that the latter is more impressive and more deserving of being in the Hall of Fame. And, when you look back at a decade, is that the person that you think of? And I think for me, what sinks the Alfredsson Hall of Fame argument for me is that, like, even as, like, I try and be objective, and I try not to, let my, like, home field bias, like, influence me too much. And it's like, if you put aside the fact that, like, I'm a Sens fan first, it's hard to argue with a straight face that Alfredsson was a player who dominated or defined the era that he played in. When Alfie was in his prime, the dominant players were guys like Jaromir Jagr, Joe Sakic, Ilya Kovalchuk, Marty St. Louis, Joe Thornton. These guys topped the scoring lists every year. And in 05, 06, and 06, 07, you could make the argument that Alfie, Spezza, Heatley were together probably the dominant line for 2 seasons. But they were immediately surpassed by the rival of Crosby and Ovechkin and Evgeny Malkin. And it's just like, I don't think you can look at me and say Alfie was, the player of, like, the 2000s or one of the players. It just doesn't stand up to scrutiny for me. And to me, Alfredsson is a special player. He is and always will be a Sens legend, but he doesn't need to be in the Hall of Fame for this to be true. And I think that the drive to put him in the Hall of Fame is fantastic, and you'd love to see it. But ultimately, I don't think, what we should want the Hall of Fame to be is not something that Alfredsson should be in. Now, let me preface this. When Karlsson is Hall of Fame eligible, fucking come back to me, because that is a guy who dominated his era and met every criteria that I've talked about. And I think that is a whole other kettle of fish.
Interesting. All right, Matt, I'll let you go first, and then I'll cover whatever you don't.
Yeah. I think, Bennett, honestly, like, you make a very compelling case. The only caveat I think that sort of goes against your argument is the fact that, like, the Hall is now what it is now. I completely agree that the Hockey Hall of Fame should be the best players of all time, and not, like, guys who won quite a few cups, guys who did this, that, and the other thing. The Hockey Hall of Fame has 4 or 5 nominations a year. That in and of itself is a bit wrong, because, after 100 years, you're going to have 500 hockey players in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and ultimately, could you name 500 players that are better than Daniel Alfredsson? No, not in a million years could you do that. And then you look at his point adjusted totals, where he sits 35th behind guys that are all in the Hall of Fame or guaranteed Hall of Famers. And you mentioned Sidney Crosby and you mentioned Alex Ovechkin. Those are generational talents, and doing what they did in their own eras is incredible. Do I think Daniel Alfredsson is as good as Alex Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby? Not in a million years. I would say Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby are 2 of the top 10 best players of all time. But when you look at what the Hockey Hall of Fame is right now, and you see guys that weren't even the best player on their team getting in, and I'm going to pick on Kevin Lowe again, because last year he got in, or 2 years ago he got in, and he's, my uncle had said he's one of 6 players that have won more than, or 5 or 6 cups or something to that effect. To me, that's not good enough.
Yeah, otherwise, players like Patrick Maroon would be in the Hall of Fame.
Exactly. And if Patrick Maroon does get into the Hockey Hall of Fame, then the Hockey Hall of Fame is the Hockey Hall of Good. Actually, no, it's the Hockey Hall of One.
Stanley Cup Awards.
The Hockey Hall of Lucky, yeah.
Yeah.
Or one, yeah, like you said.
But to me, like, I think Daniel Alfredsson embodies everything that is a hockey player and everything that is good that is a hockey player. He is was the premier leader of the NHL for years, where people said, that is a captain that leads by example and leads well. He doesn't have all these theatrics and all that. And people love that. But when he did, he showed it and people loved it as well. He is a guy who stood up for mental health awareness in Ottawa and is a paragon for that, which to me, yes, shouldn't really factor into the whole Hockey Hall of Fame thing. But at the same time, you have to look at these people as well. I'm probably not going to put in, people that didn't do good things into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And like in the guy you said, Joe Thornton and Marty St. Louis, in the eras that they played and dominated, Daniel Alfredsson was right there. Joe Thornton was number one. Jerome McGinley was number two. Daniel Alfredsson was number three in the top three players of the 2000s in point totals. I could keep listing things, and I'm sure Matt will.
Yeah.
But Alfredsson is, by definition of whatever the Hockey Hall of Fame's definition it is, has the credentials, has more of the credentials necessary to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Well, to me too, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame, right? Not the Hockey Hall of how many Stanley Cups did you have? How many, individual awards definitely matter. And I'm going to get into that, but he is one of the most famous Swedish players to ever play in the NHL. If I were to name other famous Swedish players, what you have, Forsberg, I should say Peter Forsberg, because there's
Sundin.
And then you have, Mats Sundin, you have the Sedin brothers, and then you have, Lidstrom and I guess Zetterberg. There's some guys that off the top of my head, I mean, obviously Erik Karlsson is in that conversation. He is phenomenal. Not like he once was, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked from my point. So essentially, he is one of the top 10 Swedish players to have ever played in the NHL. That's just in my opinion, that's a fact. You look at his point totals, and in almost 1,250 games played in the NHL, he had 1,157 points. That's nothing to scoff at. In 121 playoff games, 100 points. Again, very clutch player in the playoffs. We all know some of his overtime feats. Even late into his career, that game, I believe it was game-tying goal that he got on Thomas Vokoun, where he just basically went up the ice by himself with 30 seconds left in the game and tied it. And I believe that was the only game in that series against Pittsburgh in 2013 that the Sens won.
Yeah, right.
But let's get away from that. He won a Calder Trophy, which you only have one chance of winning that in your career. And then he had a King Clancy, Mark Messier Leadership Award. He was a 6-time NHL All-Star, which, again, phenomenal. Internationally, he had a gold, 3 silvers, 3 bronze medals, and 74 points in 88 international games. And, I mean, he was a member of the infamous Pizza Line. And, Danny Heatley ended up, really fading fast. But Jason Spezza, if he had won a cup, I think he would be a hands down Hall of Famer. And I think Alfie would be too. But it's just because they don't have a cup. And, in Alfie's case, he doesn't have a Lady Byng or a Ted Lindsay or one of the awards that I think is a little bit more higher tiered when you look at some of the guys who make it. But that line was infamous. And I would say that if you're a Sens fan, a Leafs fan, Habs fan, anyone who had to play divisional games against the Sens in that era, what the Pizza Line was. It is very mentionable in any conversation.
I would say the Pizza Line is one of the greatest lines in hockey ever. And which is crazy.
Yeah. And even though this is only organizational, Alfie holds the Sens record for regular season goals, assists, and points overall, franchise record. He holds the Sens record for highest plus minus rating in season, which I know we don't put a ton of stock into that, but a plus 42 is nothing to scoff at, especially in 06,
that's a crazy stat.
He holds the Sens record for most points in a single regular season game with 7 points. He holds the Sens playoff record for most games played, goals, assists, and points. So he's literally at the top of the Sens in every record that you'd want him to have. And I know you don't get participation awards for being runner-up, but he's finished second in Lady Byng trophy voting one year, third in Selke trophy voting in 05-06, He finished 4th in Lady Byng voting in 05-06, and he also finished top 3 in the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy in 2011-2012. So he's been like so close to some key pieces of hardware that I think really would have etched his name as being a Hall of Famer. And like I said, I know close isn't the thing itself, but I think if you look internationally and at his NHL legacy, both those things combined make him a hockey Hall of Famer. It's not the NHL Hall of Fame, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I think when you combine that, like all of his awards and his achievements, that to me makes a compelling argument. And but that being said, you did make a good argument, and I totally understand where you're coming from. And again, I have bias being a Sens fan, but to me, it's just he's a significant player in hockey history, and I think that he does deserve to get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts on that, but if not, we can move along.
I mean, I think it'd be great to see if he makes it into the Hall of Fame. I don't think it'll have any impact on his legacy, just because, because I think it is a borderline appointment. I think if there's a slam dunk, he'd be in already. I think even Sens fans would admit it's like a bit of, you have to make the argument. It's not, axiomatic. And I would just say that I don't think other teams would care if he was in the Hall of Fame. Like, they wouldn't be like, oh, like, yeah, Alfredsson, he really was like that great. They'd just be like, oh yeah, just another dude that like isn't maybe
I think the
Hall
Leafs
of Famer.
would care. Absolutely. And the Sabres, oh yeah. I think old heads are still kicking around that realize like how dominant that he was as a player, like offensively and defensively.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal two-way player,
and like his analytics are still bomb.
Well, friend of the show, we can call him that now. But like when we had Micah on, after that episode, he actually posted some stuff where he's like, if you look at Alfredsson, even in the later stages of his career, because let's not forget those like pizza line years, he was in his 30s. He was 33, 34, 35 in those 3 like
he was only a
10-year
veteran of the league.
And he was just like, I'm in my 30s, I'm gonna light it up, what's up? Like the fact that he was a dominant player at both ends of the ice in his mid 30s is amazing. And he was able to keep up with Spezza, who was at the time a young budding star center, and Danny Heatley, who was at the time like one of the best goal scorers in the league, if not, a top 3. So anyway,
I think that's it's the perfect way of looking at it. Should he be in the Hall of Fame as the Hall of Fame is right now? Yes. Should he be in the best players of all time, if that is a top 75 players ever list? Probably not.
as Alfie would say, probably not. But I think the biggest difference is like it's the Hockey Hall of Fame, not the NHL Hall of Fame. And if there's an NHL Hall of Fame, I could understand him being excluded. I think if we just look at the sport as a total, everything combined. But I digress. I already made the argument. So let's kind of shift gears. Let's look at present day Senators. Okay. And we had some speculation. I believe it was Elliot Friedman who said that Connor Brown may have interest in testing free agency next summer. So that's something I wanted to touch on with you guys. And, Connor Brown, he has 1 year left, being paid about $3.6 million. And, what do you guys think? Would you extend him? Would you trade him? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think Connor Brown is a fine player. I don't think he moves the needle very much one way or the other. Him and Nick Paul both had very successful 2020-21 seasons, but both of them, and then they went to the Worlds, and they combined for that great overtime gold medal winning goal, and it was great. They had a great summer, and then they came back, and I think both of them had unimpressive seasons this past year. Paul, we don't need to talk about it. He's already gone. Brown, I think he had some injuries, and he was nursing some injuries even when he was playing. But even still, I think 39 points in 64 games was disappointing, especially given the fact that the Sens had to contend with a lot of injuries and COVID absences this season. And I think guys like him and Nick Paul had an opportunity to step up and they didn't do that. Not in terms of their offense, like perhaps like in like a leadership role or intangibles, like they might have brought some value to the team, but like when it came to like plugging the offensive gap that the team faced when a lot of our top players were out, they didn't really do that. And I think that, similarly to how I characterize Nick Paul, guys that can't do that have limited value. And while I think keeping Connor Brown around would not be a mistake, I mean, if they kept him around the same kind of salary he's making now, but if he wanted a pay raise or if that's the kind of reason that he wants to test the market, then I think the Sens ought to trade him, because I think that there's going to be other guys that can do what Connor Brown can do. And for things that he can't do, you're going to need a bigger gun. And he's not that.
Yeah, I think Connor Brown is what you would deem as an elite third line winger.
Important caveat.
Yeah, he was on pace for a really excellent season, and then he got injured, and that's probably going to affect his value. I think you keep him if you are in cup contention, in playoff contention. He's a guy that I think would thrive in the playoffs for that grind. His penalty killing ability, gets a lot of breakaways, and like one of these days he's going to figure out how to convert on some of those, and then it's over for this league. But I would say he's one of the guys you'd like to keep around, but if he's asking more than $4.5 million, that's not a contract I'm willing to give out, because at some point you need to see more offensive production from him with the chances he's been given. And I know some people were saying, well, he hasn't really played with like the best talent. And it's like you were playing with Tim Stützle for most of the season. And if you're not able to convert on chances with him, like, is that your limit then? Is that like, yes, I understand you're injured, but if he's feeding you easy, breezy beautifuls, then go for it. But I don't know. He's a guy that like would be a good playoff performer. And I'd like to keep him, but I'm not going out of my salary comfort to sign him when we have bigger contracts to fry.
Yeah, and I was going to say something along the same lines. Zub is going to need a contract next summer. Tim Stützle is going to need a contract extension next summer. So it's like, okay, what does he want? Personally, I actually wouldn't go over $4 million unless he has a season this year where he is healthy and he redeems himself and he puts up, 60 points or whatever, which I think is probably towards the top end of what I would expect for him. Then I could understand, like, you're like, okay, he's been healthy, he's provided, and that's the kind of guy that you're like, okay, maybe we can commit 4 years at $4 million for him. If he has a year where he does, hit that upper limit and he's going for like a 60 plus point season rather than like 40 to 50 points, that's when I'm on the same train as Matt, where you gotta ship him out, even if you're headed towards the playoffs. Like, I just don't think if you're a team that's not contending, like the Sens aren't going to be a contender next year unless, they do net some insane top six forward and all the defense clicks and Hamonic comes out and becomes old Hamonic and whatever, right? Like if it's not going to happen, if you don't see yourself competing with the likes of Tampa Bay and Toronto and Stanley Cup final, let's look at Western Conference, like Colorado, those teams, if like going up against those teams, you're going to be very hard pressed, then yeah, trade Connor Brown, especially if he's having a good season, get a first round pick or whatever. And then who knows, maybe use those draft picks and flip them for another player who you could bring in, who's maybe younger and can provide more for you and help you take a step forward the next year. So to me, it depends. It really depends on his performance this season, whether he can stay healthy and what he's doing for the team. So transitioning from the talk about Connor Brown, the Sens are looking for a top six forward. That's not news to anybody. We've all heard this before. So I want to ask you guys, and then we'll go to me, who your preferred top six forward addition is. And we won't talk about most realistic. If because that is a totally different question. Let's talk about your most preferred of the guys who you've heard that are available on the market or potential guys who you could bring in through free agency. Who are you interested in? We'll kick it off with Matt.
All right. So I have a list of Besser, DeBrincat, Fiala, Forsberg, Giroux, Nichushkin, and Burakovsky. I know Keller's been sort of thrown around, but like I really, really doubt that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Arizona walked that back, like not publicly, but
yeah,
it was kind of rumored that Arizona had changed their minds and seen Keller as being a core piece going forward.
Yeah, and I know, Freeman put out a post saying like Arizona, Chicago, I think, and two other teams were interested in the Sens' 7th overall pick. I mean, like my preferred choice would definitely be DeBrincat. I think he is a very, very good player. He's got one more year, and then you're going to have to sign him to a big old contract. But I think we have the assets to go out and get him. I think his game would look really good beside Tim Stützle. He has everything you would want in a top 6 forward, and like he's that name value. He's been doing great things in Chicago, where he's sort of taken the torch from Patrick Kane, and it's like he's the guy now, which is awesome to see. And like if he's available and they're interested in your 7th overall pick, you give up quite a bit to get a exceptional top 6 forward.
Yeah, and the thing with DeBrincat, he's only 24.
Like exactly, he's young.
He's not,
he's a growing member of your core.
Now I know his qualifying offer would be a bit more expensive because he's $6.4 million cap hit next season, but I believe he makes like $9 million. Like he has a higher actual real salary, if you will. So that's the only thing, that if they qualified him next summer, he would get a minimum $9 million. So essentially you have to trade for him and then convince him to sign under $9 million. But anyway, I'll let Bennett kind of chime in here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like interesting targets that the Suns could go for. I think that, DeBrincat would be a really excellent choice. I think Philip Forsberg is one of like the premier potential like free agent targets this offseason. I think he also has a ton of offensive pedigree and could be really cool to have. I think that my choice, and I appreciate that this is sort of less like objective and more sentimental, I think it's hard to argue against the desire to want Claude Giroux here. I think just like the vibes would be huge. And I mean that like semi-seriously in the sense of like, I feel like the last like real homer, like we kind of traded away all of like the homers from the team, like be it, like guys who were popular like Pajot or Borowiecki, or guys who were not, or Mark Methot, or guys who were not very popular like Cody Ceci. Like they were all hometown guys who Sens fans could really get behind and cheer for. Even if like they weren't having a great season, you're like, oh, but he's like a hometown guy. He's active in the community. It's like that's great. I feel like that's the one thing this group of Sens prospects doesn't have. This like core of our young team is like a heart and soul. I just shouldn't say heart and soul, because we know Tkachuk, has that kind of thing covered. But I mean, it's just like that hometown connection. Like there's a lot of American players and like European players. I think it'd just be cool to have that guy again. And I think if Giroux was willing to take on that mantle later at this late stage in his career, it'd be a really nice thing for the organization to have. And yeah, I just think it'd be a cool move. I think it'd be a fun move. And if there's one thing that the Sens don't do very often, it's fun moves. Even if like, we do something that's kind of good, it's usually not very like sexy. It's like, this would be like an actual sexy move that like would be fun for fans and for Giroux and his family and everything.
All right. Well, I guess I'll chime in with mine. But yeah, Claude Giroux would be fun. I think just like you said, as a guy who did grow up in the Ottawa area and played hockey here, it would just be great to see him come to Ottawa and play some games for the Sens. But I have to go this way. I'm so sorry to the people who are watching or listening and are like, oh, there's no way, but I got to go with Philip Forsberg. There was no way in my mind that this was even like a percent possibility, but now to me it's like a 5 to 10%. All right, it's really increasing. When Philip Forsberg was in town, I know it was for a wedding, was what I saw on Twitter, but even so, him and Borvietsky kind of playing around, talking about the downtown core and stuff like that, and him saying how nice the downtown core is, after actually visiting it. It was nice to see that, because I think it kind of shows that some players don't have, like, they have a certain perspective of the city, but they haven't actually been to the city. So to me, it was nice to kind of see him being like, okay, yeah, like you weren't lying, even if he was just joking around and saying the city's beautiful, like that's cool. But aside from that, like, look at his point totals. The man put up 84 points in 69 games played this season. He is turning 28 in August. So if you're signing him long term, you do have to accept the risk that in the later stages of that contract, he may be less effective. It's possible. That's kind of the risk you take with big name free agents who are entering, or not entering their prime, but are like at that prime and are expecting that big money UFA contract. So if he wants like $9 million for the next 7 years, honestly, I find that that's going to be hard to say no to. Like, if he wants to come to Ottawa, and remains to be seen, but he's a guy who steps in, he gives you instant goal scoring. He can play with Tim Stützle, and that would be a hell of a pairing of those two guys on a line. And then, I don't know, Connor Brown playing with those two. No, just kidding. But but seriously, like, a line of Forsberg and Stützle, like, that'd be so dynamic and so much fun to watch. You're getting Sens fans in the seats. Like, it brings a whole level of dynamic ability that you haven't really had, I think, since Duchesne and Hoffman were together. I think that they were a really fun dynamic duo.
Yeah.
And the Sens haven't really had that since. So that would be cool to see. And I mean, with Forsberg, he's not just a goal scorer. He actually does hit. This past season, he had over 100 hits. And people might not think of Philip Forsberg as a very physical player, but this season he really stepped it up. And it wasn't the norm for his game, but it does show that he's capable of bringing that element if the coaching wants him to do that. So that was kind of nice to see. Obviously, we know how DJ Smith is. He likes the guys that grind it out.
What I understand, he's also like a good defensive player as well. Like, I obviously have not watched a lot of Philip Forsberg. I know he's a really good player. He's got a lot of offensive ability, but from what I understand, like, he's a really good defensive forward as well. And that's a really good selling point as well.
And he has really good possession numbers, which is always a nice thing too.
Here at
definitely,
Centennial.
yeah, Centennial, we're all about those possession numbers. And just so you guys know, he had one face-off draw this year, and he won it. So, elite right there. Elite face-off takers.
Love to see it.
But yeah, so anyway, that's my case. The likelihood of him signing with the Sens, very low, but it would be a nice little dream.
I think out of all of the players we named, like that we made cases for, I think Bennett's is like hovering at like 60%.
Yeah, I think it's possible. For me, the biggest question mark is, does Claude Giroux want to go for a championship, or is he okay with settling for not getting a championship? Like,
just yet.
Because if we're going back to our Hall of Fame discussion, Claude Giroux is the kind of player, like, he needs, I think, that piece of hardware to kind of cement his legacy, because he's always played second fiddle to Crosby. When you look at, the 2010s, he was always the guy who's compared to Crosby, and Pittsburgh was always getting the upper hand on Philadelphia, and he was never really able to make his mark on the NHL like Crosby was. So I think that hardware would go a long way for making him a case. So that's the thing that sticks out in my mind. If he's a really competitive player and he wants his name in the Hockey Hall of Fame, he'll want to go for that Stanley Cup. But I guess it remains to be seen. It would be cool. I'd be all for it. And I guess we'll see what happens come mid-July. And we'll wrap it up with the origins and legend of Gulk. Sens legend. And yes, anybody who is in touch with their memes on Twitter or Reddit or Discord will know that Gulk has become a legend over the last week. So it all started when Frank Senators at Sleepin' Baker on Twitter had a dream that the Sens signed a player named Gulk. That was it. And he wore number 5. So stealing Holden's number 5. Yeah. And so the Sens social media person actually took this and did like a happy belated birthday Gulk meme, which is hilarious. And I'm so glad that the organization is embracing like the sicko vibes, if you will, that I think we're really lacking this year. So it was fun to see them get involved in it. And I guess I don't have too much to add. I just wanted to give a shout out to Frank Sanders for giving us some early off-season fun to throw around the Sens social media universe.
I theorize that Gulk is like a second cousin of Zoob. Like they're definitely related. You know, they see each other at family reunions. I think the whole Gulk thing is just the embodiment of Sens Twitter. You know, we get something and we just like latch onto it, and we just ride the wave until there's no more wave to be rid. Sort of like the sicko movement. And I think it's great because like the Sens generally haven't had a whole lot going for them, but I think one of the great things about our team is that, you know, the Sens Twitter and social media interactions between fans are generally pretty awesome. And it's really awesome to see the new Sens social media coordinator like taking all advantage of the fun that they're basically being given when it comes to Sens Twitter.
Definitely. Bennett just recently learned of the legend of Gulk, so Bennett, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I was unforgivably just like AWOL on Sens Twitter last week. I was like actually busy during the workday, so I missed the origins of this meme. But I'm with other Matt here. As soon as I saw Gulk, I was like, did we just like come up with a new nickname for Zoob? I don't understand what's like the. So I also immediately made the association with Zoob as sort of like a, you know, like a single synonym, you know, like kind of vaguely Russian Eastern European sounding name that you associate with the Sens. And I can kind of see where like the OP's like dream state like took him to, like it kind of like I can visualize how we got to Gulk. And then from there, you know, obviously, you know, things just took off as they do.
Well, if the Sens manage to draft Gleb Trikazov in the second round at this year's NHL draft, he'll be like our Gulk because we'll just be like Gleb. Yeah. So I guess
it's the same vibes as Zub when nobody knew how to say Zoob's name, including myself.
I always knew it was Zooby Dooby Doo.
Love it.
All right. Sens. If you want to make sure you never miss one of our episodes, please subscribe to our channel or follow us on whichever platform you're listening to us on. You can also find us on all the different social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Senstennial or the Senstennial Podcast if you're on Facebook. We're also on the Sens Discord server, so if you're on there, feel free to DM me. I'm in there, and I know Bennett lurks in there, so you can always message one of us and if you have any questions for the show. And we're also on the Sens subreddit periodically, posting different player summaries or interview summaries of people who pop on a TSN 1200. So yeah, you can find our content on there and our episodes on there too. So yeah, thank you for listening. And as always, guys, go Sens go.
Go Sens go, baby.
Send them hard.
Boots on the ground insider, Bennett.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my blue check mark.